Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com.
Welcome to this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive for the third week in February 2026. I'm Kellen Walker in Las Vegas. We're breaking down some of the biggest stories in the auto industry from the past week and looking forward to what's in store in the days ahead. Joining me today are Larry Velaquette, who covers Toyota, Mazda, and Subaru for us at Automotive News. Larry Legend, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Kel. Great to be here.
And Greg Layson, digital and mobile editor of our sibling publication, Automotive News Canada, and host of the Automotive News Canada podcast. Greg, it's great to have you back.
Good to be back.
All right, guys, so let's start with the big news from this week. The U.S. Supreme Court struck down many of President Trump's tariffs, ruling they were issued illegally under a 1977 emergency powers law. Larry, this is a 6-3 decision that affects reciprocal tariffs and duties on Canadian, Mexican, and Chinese goods. But tariffs on vehicles, auto parts, steel, aluminum, and copper remain in place. Walk us through what just happened here.
So, Kel, what happened is that the U.S. Supreme Court ruled 6-3 to say that Donald Trump did not have the ability to enact these emergency tariffs under what's known as the IEEPA, the IEEPA tariffs. Notably, this was the same ruling that the Supreme Court upheld, a ruling mentioned 6 months, or that was made 6 months ago, that these tariffs were illegal, and a majority of the Supreme Court said yes. But in that ruling, 6 months ago, they stayed the decision pending this outcome. So the tariffs have continued to be collected during the last 6 months. And now, what's happened here, and this is extremely complicated, but let's just stick with the auto industry part, right? Because this is it's going to be a mess no matter what, because we're talking about now the government has to refund this money because it was collected unconstitutionally. Right now, the estimate of what's been collected under this emergency powers law is about $133 billion, including at least $8.6 billion that was collected in the auto industry. And that will have to be refunded at some point. We think the decision didn't actually deal with how to refund it. It simply said that these were illegal. So right now we are hours in when we're recording this, we're hours into this decision. It's going to take some time for everybody to digest this. Already, though, we are seeing some reactions from the federal government, the Trump administration saying that they'll just redo these tariffs under different laws. What is notable, though, is that for the auto industry, most of the tariffs paid by the auto industry are what are called Section 232 tariffs. Those tariffs remain in place. So the tariffs that are driving up prices in dealerships across the country and really creating havoc with our trading partners, those are unaffected by this ruling.
Now, Greg, from a Canadian perspective, what does this ruling mean? The court didn't say whether refunds are owed or how they be distributed. What are you hearing?
I mean, more than anything for Canadians as a whole, and even in the auto industry, this is more of a moral victory. It feels good because Donald Trump has been ruled against. And remember, as Larry said, most of what this ruling covers are tariffs and duties outside of the auto industry. But what it does is it gives a little bit of hope to the industry and to Canadians that the 232 tariffs might be next. Although, if you listen to all the experts, Donald Trump has a little more leeway and a little more authority over those 232 tariffs. And so those will probably remain in place. And so just as the prices remain high in the United States, they're going to remain high over here. Some of the tariffs that have been collected under the IEEPA, maybe there's a refund coming, but as Larry said, we're still a few hours into this. We don't really know who's getting back what or if they even have to be reimbursed at this point. But in the immediate term, there's a lot of positivity. There are a lot of people applauding the decision, right down from government officials, those in opposition, some in the auto industry. But basically, everyone's saying, okay, now do 232. Are those going away or are they staying? Chances are they're going to stay because they are a matter of national security, according to the president. And according to American laws, the president has the ability to institute those tariffs if they are deemed to address a national security issue. So in Donald Trump's mind, aluminum, steel, auto parts, those all represent a national security threat to the United States. Now, I would say this. I would agree with that if, in fact, we were sending over Chinese electric vehicles. Perhaps there is a national security issue there in terms of technology. But just from building vehicles in Canada and even in Mexico under the USMCA, a lot of people in Canada within the industry just don't see a national defense or a national security issue with anything that's built under the guise and under the rules of origin of the USMCA.
Can I just clarify something that Greg just said? He prefaced that last sentence with among Canadians, and it should also include among Canadians and many, many Americans.
Yeah.
They don't see a national threat in driving a Chrysler Pacifica or a Toyota RAV4. That does not constitute a national threat to many, many Americans. So I just want to point that out, that it's there are many of us who are on the same side on this issue.
And Larry, as you mentioned, the auto industry paid about $8.6 billion through October 2025 in duties now deemed unconstitutional. How do you expect suppliers and automakers to respond? Do you see them filing a lawsuit to get their money back?
Well, presumably they shouldn't have to, right? I mean, for every dollar that gets sent into the federal government, there's a receipt into the Treasury. And even though you're talking about separate fiscal years, either side of October 1st, there is a record of what every company paid in duties. So presumably you just reverse those, just like a tax return, you just reverse those transactions for the duties that are deemed unconstitutional. Now, will the federal government do that? Probably not. They'll make it very complex. But right now they don't really know. Nobody knows at this point what will happen. But I will say this: if I'm a supplier or if I'm an automaker who did pay a couple $100 million in duties that are now unconstitutional, damn right I want my money back. Right? I have more use from that money than the U.S. government does. I want to make sure that I get that back. So I think every company is going to be very eager to watch for a way, watch what the way is that they're going to get their money back. But really, they shouldn't have to file lawsuits. They shouldn't have to do anything other than say to the Department of Treasury or the Department of Commerce, hey, we sent you this money. You weren't able to take it legally. Send it back.
Before this week's Supreme Court ruling, tariffs were already hitting dealer lots hard. Larry, walk us through this new data from Catalyst IQ that says automakers used model year changeovers to quietly raise prices about $1,200 more aggressively than last year.
Yeah, so Catalyst IQ is the successor company to Cloud Theory, and Cloud Theory has been tracking average marketed price for us since these tariffs came online back in April. So we've had a little box on our website every day that shows what the average marketed price is for that day. And if you watch that, you noticed it didn't move very much. And a lot of that was because even as the tariffs kicked in, automakers were adjusting the mix. And so just this broad average wasn't really showing what's happening. We also thought that what we were told by automakers is that a lot of them didn't want to get up in the grill of the Trump administration by raising prices, even though they were paying these bills. Notably, Toyota paid $10 billion this year in tariffs. They didn't want to get up there and get in front and say, we have to raise prices because of these tariffs. So what they did, we believed, was what we were told they were going to do was bake them into the model year changeover. So what we did is we went to Catalyst IQ, who every night scrapes information off of every dealer website in the United States by VIN. And we said, take a look at that data and tell us how prices have changed on vehicles that were not built in the U.S., and they can do that by VIN. Right? The first number of the VIN indicates what country, first number or letter, indicates what country the vehicle was assembled in. So they went back, they did the analysis, and what they found is that the vehicles from 4 nations had significant increases. The biggest one was our friends north of the border, Canada. Their prices, the prices of Canadian assembled vehicles sold in the United States, went up almost 10% just since last October. So what that tells you is that automakers were baking that into the changeovers, right? The same happened, though not quite as extreme, with vehicles from Japan, with vehicles from Germany, and with vehicles from Mexico. US-made vehicles went up slightly, right? Less than $100. And what's really interesting is that vehicles assembled in South Korea actually went down. Now,
how does that work?
Yeah, exactly, right? How does that work? Well, I tell you how it works. If you're an automaker and you have prices rising all around you, what do? If you keep your prices low or actually even lower them, you are buying what's called buying share. You're buying market share, right? It's going to cost you a little more, but you've now answered an affordability challenge for consumers. You've exposed them to your vehicles. So this drop, which is laid out in our story, this drop is simply a move by Hyundai Kia. Just to mention, their General Motors also was building the tracks there, right? This is a move generally by Hyundai Kia to buy share.
Now, Greg, we just heard the data from Larry, and as he said, sticker prices have jumped nearly $4,000 for vehicles that have been, assembled in Canada. This has to be painful for Canadian-built vehicles. How are they reacting north of the border?
I mean, so far it's full steam ahead for Toyota building the RAV4. Part of the reason some of the prices in Canada went up is because Toyota, for example, went all hybrid on all its RAV4s, a little more expensive. But Toyota has made massive investments in their factories up here, and they're not turning their back on it. Honda is full steam ahead where they're at in Alliston. They did move some production to the United States to avoid some reciprocal tariffs and that sort of stuff. So right now, early on, it doesn't look like much is going to change, but we're still waiting for Fort Oakville to come back online. I don't know what happens there with Super Duty trucks when they're starting to be produced. We're waiting to see what fills Brampton Assembly, owned by Stellantis. We don't know what's going to be in there. Right now, the easy solution is don't build anything in Canada. If you have an empty factory, just don't fill it and you can save some money. So in terms of sticker prices in Canada, I can confirm too that transaction prices through 2025 were up about 2.5%, not as much as everyone thought. But we do know that automakers are spreading out the cost of tariffs across all vehicles. JD Power always uses this example where if one particular vehicle has a price increase of $6,000, that vehicle doesn't go up $6,000. 10 vehicles go up $600. So they're spreading it out a little bit. So in terms of the consumer in Canada, we haven't seen a lot yet. In terms of production in Canada, it's full steam ahead because as everyone knows, this industry just doesn't turn on a dime. They've invested in this now and everyone's waiting to see what happens with, as we started the show, 232 tariffs and with the USMCA. Once there's more clarity, this dust might settle. And we might see transaction prices come back down to somewhere a little more normal pre-tariff. The other thing I can tell you is automakers up here are also adding to their destination fees. So the sticker prices still look reasonably affordable on some vehicles. But when you look at the destination fees, some of them have almost doubled in cost. So the automakers are finding a way to make up for that cost of the tariffs.
Perfect. All right. Well, speaking of big news from this week, Volkswagen workers in Chattanooga just ratified their first UAW contract in a landslide vote. Coming up, we'll talk about what that means for the union's Southern organizing push. That's next on Weekend Drive.
The auto industry is the most disrupted on the planet right now. On this week's episode of the Automotive News Shift podcast, we hear from Dan Hirsch, global co-leader of automotive and industrial practice at Alex Partners. He breaks down the firm's 2026 Disruption Index and explains why tariffs, geopolitical tensions, and the rise of the Chinese automakers are leaving global executives struggling to plan for the future.
Senior executives, they are either finding themselves in a spot where they have to redefine themselves, which can be very difficult when you're really well established, or they're going to find themselves in a very different role or in a very different company.
I'm Molly Boygon. Join me on Shift, available this Sunday wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Weekend Drive. I'm Kellen Walker with Larry Bellaquette and Greg Layson. So, Volkswagen workers in Chattanooga have ratified their first contract with the UAW, and it wasn't even close. Now, Larry, UAW President Shawn Fain says 96% of workers approved the 4-year pact. That's a landslide. What did workers get from the deal?
The terms of the deal, according to UAW, this is their first contract with VW. The workers will get a 20% general wage increase over 5 years. They get improved health care with lower out-of-pocket costs, a one-time $4,000 ratification bonus, and annual bonuses of $2,550 each year. So you got about $15,000 in bonuses over 5 years, plus a 20% wage bonus. It's not bad money.
After taxes, though, let's be real. I'm just kidding.
We're all paying them.
I know we're all paying them, right? The only reason why I say that is because tax time is like now.
Believe me.
So this
and
is a major.
Trust me, I'm paying more than you guys. Okay?
Oh, for sure.
Just so you know,
You're paying 2% more. Don't kid yourself. And you get health care.
Well, this is a major victory for the union in a decades-long push to organize foreign-owned plants in the South. Where does the UAW go from here, and what's the next target?
So they have many targets that they identified early on. Whether they can get any of the rest of them to votes, we haven't seen yet, right? The next one, obvious, we think, is going to be Mercedes. Their plants in the South. We'll see, though. This might be a one and done. I want to say first, this is an achievement, a historic achievement, right? Let's be clear. They have not had success organizing transplant workers since 1979, right? It was before Mike Martinez was born. It was, as we noted, but it's a long way back. I was still in middle school at that point. So it's been a very, very long time since they had success. And just winning an election was historic. Actually getting a first contract is way more difficult. And the fact that they did, and that they got 96% approval on a ratification, is pretty stunning. Now, will other workers in the South at Mercedes, at perhaps BMW, Toyota's got a plant in Missouri that they were targeting for a while, will they go to? That's the open question. What I will say is those companies are probably not going to, they're going to do everything they can to not be unionized. But there's a secret. And I say this as a former union negotiator, right? If you don't want a union at your place of business, act like you already have one, right? If you're an employer and if you don't want your company unionized, act like it's already there. Treat your employees like they're already unionized, and you won't have a union.
That sounds like, that's kind of like Toyota, though, right? Isn't Toyota kind of like that?
Well, I can speak for that up in Canada. I have Toyota employees tell me all the time, we don't need a union because they give us what Unifor negotiates with the Detroit Three.
Right.
So they have no reason to vote for a union because Toyota turns around and gives them essentially the pattern that the Detroit Three get when they bargain with Unifor.
Yeah, and they did the same. The foreign transplant plants did the same thing when the UAW got its contract here in, what was that, 23, right?
Yes.
Yeah, they almost all immediately raised wages as a result.
Well, Greg, speaking of Canada, I know Canadian workers have been watching this. Does this have any implications north of the border?
Not directly. I mean, Unifor's been trying hard to unionize Toyota, Honda, others around the province and the supply chain, the supply sector. I don't foresee that happening ever at Honda and Toyota. I always get positive reactions from them in terms of their pay, their wages, their hours, all of that stuff. What I'm keeping my eye on is, they did unionize Nexstar, which was up until recently a joint venture between LG Energy Solution and Stellantis. So they unionized that shop, the battery plant in Windsor. I think the next target would be Volkswagen's PowerCo battery plant in St. Thomas. But I mean, shovels are barely in the ground there. But that would be the next target for Unifor, I think, in Canada.
Yeah, they're going to need workers there before they can form a union, right?
Yeah. So we're a long ways off. I mean, like I said, shovels barely in the ground there.
Yeah.
Let's get some bodies in the building first.
Yeah.
Or let's get a building first.
Yeah, right. Let's get an actual building first, right? Can we get the foundation built first?
Yeah.
Now, shifting gears to something we've been hearing a lot about, humanoid robots in manufacturing. Now, Greg, you've been covering this story as automakers like Hyundai and Mercedes push toward full assembly automation with humanoid robots. Experts are warning about a fundamental economic paradox. If robots eliminate manufacturing jobs, who will have money to buy cars? Walk us through what you found.
Yeah, I wrote a whole story on this, and it starts with a 70-year-old story that involves the UAW president Walter Reuther and a Ford Motor Company manager who is allegedly Henry Ford II having a conversation where they say to each other, "Hey, Walter, how are you going to get those robots to pay union dues?" And Reuther says, "How are you going to get them to buy cars?" Right? So this has been going on for 70 years across automation. And so when I wrote this story, what we haven't been able to find is a CFO or an accountant at an automaker who's actually looked at this and said, "Hey, we can't go full automation because we'd have no one to buy our cars." But what I have found is Unifor, for example, wants to sit down and negotiate robotics and humanoid robots as part of the collective agreement. They want to make sure that they aren't taking jobs, but that they're enhancing jobs, that they're increasing efficiency and productivity, and that any of those gains are shared with the union. So it's really going to become a bargaining topic when they sit around the table, probably this Labor Day and beyond, when contract talks start, because we're coming up on that. The other thing is this: the Canadian government is trying to lure Chinese automakers to Ontario to build vehicles. Well, the thing is, China leads the world in robot densification. They have more doing human jobs than any other country on the planet. And so we just ran a story over on Auto News, and we picked it up at Auto News Canada, saying the first dark factory, which means all production done by humanoid robots, AI, and other robotics in the plant, could appear in 2030, and it will likely be Chinese. So the question is, are we pursuing as a Canadian government a factory that's going to come here and then just not employ anyone? We don't know that yet. But if you've seen the videos just this week of robots doing kung fu in China, it is a scary proposition that these robots are going to end up in factories, and they will end up in a Hyundai factory in Georgia as late as this year or early next year doing some jobs. In fact, Toyota Canada just this week announced it will have 6 on a shop floor assisting in building RAV4s. So yeah, it is a very valid question. What do you do when the robots arrive? Who is left to buy the vehicles? One labor prof at Brock University that I spoke to says maybe the government has to step in and declare a robot tax. So if you have X amount of robots, you have to pay more taxes in order to offset the fewer employees that are needed on the factory floor. It is a conundrum that is coming, and I'm not so sure the union, labor, employees, governments, and automakers are all on the same page when it comes to what happens when we have humanoid robots building vehicles.
I will say, Greg is absolutely right here. This is a larger issue than just the automaker and their labor relations. This is a larger issue than just governments and automakers. I mean, this is a societal issue. Yep. It's even bigger than just countries, right? You're talking about a global issue that is going to impact humanity writ large.
Yeah.
Now, there are jobs where humanoid robots, you can see where humanoid robots would be so helpful, like home health aides, for example. Fantastic use if you could program them to have a humanoid robot to help you out, help somebody elderly off the toilet or out of the tub, or to, be there as long as they weren't, you're going to kill them from all the science fiction we watch, right? But if you had an assistant there that, that could help you, fantastic use. When we get into manufacturing, let's look at what manufacturing jobs are. These are low education jobs for the most part. They are physically demanding jobs. They are repetitive. They lead to injuries. They're frankly perfect for robotics, but that's a problem. You have vast numbers of citizens who are in those jobs, right? And as a society, and not just in by nation, as a society, mankind is going to have to figure out what to do with this.
I mean, you bring up a great point about assisting. So when I first started at Automotive News Canada, almost more than 10 years ago now, we did a story on Ford's exoskeletons that were being used to make it easier for its employees to lift heavy items such as batteries. And that was a real bonus. And that would save the health of the employee and money for the employer, because those employees weren't suffering injuries as often as they were before wearing an exoskeleton to help. That is a way that they help. But we're talking about robots that can come in and simply do the job in its entirety. That is job loss. That is not job assistance. And that is a big, big issue for the unions and for the automakers.
Do you guys think this is a little polarizing, though? Because I just feel like with the robotic technology, we're still a little far off from, having efficient robots. I mean, just as simple as robots that I've seen like at CES of folding shirts. It's like a human can fold this shirt 10 times faster than this robot, right? So it's like, is it just a little polarizing? Are we being a little too doom and gloom? Because my thing is I think robots are great for like the nasty jobs. So for instance, like I think they should put robots in mines. No human wants to be in a copper mine, right? Put the robots in the mines. We want to get all these, these battery plants online and do all this stuff and centralize our supply chain here in the United States. Have the damn robots do that work.
I would say this, based on, and I did a lot of reading and research over the last 3 weeks on this for that story. I would say we don't really know how far off mass production of robots are that have the ability to do the jobs we're discussing. I would also warn that everything I read said some of the robots that are out there now can watch you work and learn your movements and learn your job. So that is a possibility. Now, the final point I would make, and I brought this up on an editorial call at Automotive News this week, is how are we going to power all of these things? I've done the research. These robots last about 4 hours on a charge. So they're going to need replacement twice a shift, essentially. And that's going to take a lot of energy. And we here, at least in Canada, one of the big complaints about EVs is the power grid's not ready. So if the power grid isn't ready to power electric vehicles for all, how is the power grid going to be remotely close to power an entire population of robots? And, oh, by the way, run AI, run ChatGPT and similar programs and cool them and all of this stuff that goes into the energy needs. And so while it's easy to play and say doom and gloom, I also think we need to take a step back and go, how soon are these really going to arrive? And how are they really going to be powered? And how are they really going to be used? I think these stories are great to drive interest and readership. And I think there are facts that are immensely important in the things we do. But long term, no one's really been able to say, how are they going to be powered? When will they arrive en masse?
Yeah. You know what? Greg is absolutely right here. And like I said, these are societal issues that we have to deal with. I just want to point out, we are all old enough to remember 4 years ago when the thought of how are we going to power all these electric vehicles when we don't have enough generation or the grid is on. That debate raged. Nobody's brought up that debate as we're building data centers
right
all over the place. Yeah, it's the same electricity, folks.
Yeah.
If we didn't have enough power to run EVs, but we suddenly have enough power to run data centers, in every damn town in the Midwest, I don't get that.
Yeah. The final point I would make is this: my wife works at a bank. She works as a teller on the line, serving people every day. The ATM was invented, 50 years ago, and they still have jobs. And they were told the ATM was going to put them out of business before my wife was even born. So, I mean, it takes a long time. How long did it take us to go from essentially the first Mac to a computer in our pockets, right? And so this is the pace at which technology moves. It's going to quicken, no question about it. But when will it arrive? We don't know.
Yep.
It's a great point, Greg, because At the same time, I was at the grocery store yesterday, and the self-checkout lines were a lot longer than the regular checkout lines, but only 2 regular checkout lines were open, but everybody was in the self-checkout line. But there's still a place for it. I get what you're saying.
Well, I say this, it's similar in auto. Why are the sales of trucks and SUVs up? Because there are no sedans to buy, right? So if you want people to use the self-checkout, you don't give them a human to check out with, right? And so there are ways that companies can force you into making a decision you may or may not want to make.
Absolutely right. Let's leave it there, guys. Greg, Larry, thank you so much for joining me.
So Greg, who's going to win the men's gold medal game?
Oh boy, man. You know, I got to say Canada because I'm from Canada, but I am looking forward to it as long as the United States is there. That's what everyone wants, coast to coast to coast up here and across North America. Bring on the United States. It has so much meaning. I think it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to watch it, but who knows? Who knows?
Me too.
More interest in that than the women's game, believe me. But, you know, pride's a little hurt up here. took a little dent.
All right, that's all for this weekend drive edition of Daily Drive. I'm Kellen Walker. Thanks to Automotive News executive producer Jake Neer for his help on today's podcast. You can get the latest news on the Supreme Court's tariff ruling, VW's UAW contract, humanoid robots, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back on Monday for a conversation with Dan Hirsch of Alex Partners about a new study that says the automotive industry is the most disrupted industry on the planet right now.
They're individual disruptors that are kind of pushing these things, in many cases heads of state or administrations, and not things that you can kind of plan for even with advanced statistical models or artificial intelligence.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.